long. Double down. Fight until there's nothing left.
Ladies and gents, my name is Xander, aka Deislayers, and in this video, we're going to discuss and review one of my favorite and certainly one of the best sniper rifles, in particular an energy sniper rifle out of all the other ones in the entire game, and it's called the Long Goodbye. Now many of you are probably wondering, what the heck, I've never heard this thing before in my entire life, and that's because it actually comes from one of this week's weekly Nightfalls, and it's called the Insight Terminus. For those of you that don't know, this is the Nightfall that has that colossal scion at the very end who looks like it's going to overpower you. But actually, as long as you have on two things, momentum and arc cinch along with that of a work lift coil, I guarantee you that as long as you guys are running around, regaining your health, and then down that guy very quickly with some work lifts, that Nightfall is going to be so easy to burn through, and you're going to have a very high chance of getting an exceptionally good roll on this oh so snappy and oh so sickening sniper rifle. Now that you guys know how to get your hands on this beauty, the other things that we're going to discuss is the weapon's base stats, which in particular base stats that we're looking for to actually further optimize, and then comes the weapon's perks that we can enhance that even more so, and lastly a tip on how to use sniper rifles and the main reason why I haven't made a sniper rifle guide as of yet. To find all this out, the only thing left to do is to eviscerate the notification button, and let's jump right into the video. Usually, it's at this point in time that I show you guys the weapon's lethality stats, and in particular its TTK. But because this thing is a sniper rifle, as you know, it has an instantaneous TTK as long as you guys are landing those critical headshots. So rather, what we should look at and ask ourselves is what kind of perks and also what kind of base stats are we looking for to increase this weapon's overall chances of getting more critical headshots to thus obtain that instantaneous TTK. So before we even get into the weapon's base stats, you first of all have to understand some knowledge about how sniper rifles work, and in particular with two base stats, and the ones that we're trying to increase here is the weapon's handling speed and its range factor. What some Guardians may or may not know about handling is that it actually increases a weapon's ADS time, or in other words, its aim down sight time. And for sniper rifles, and in particular within PvP, this is an absolute must, and you have to have this factor be exceptionally high, because if you don't, then it's going to take far too long to actually even aim down sights, and by the time that you even know it, you're going to be incinerated, eradicated, and obliterated just like that. Poof. I know for 110% certainty that you do not want this to happen to you, and rather you want to do the vice versa of this and inflict those types of adjectives on the enemy Guardians. And the next best way to do that besides handling is via the weapon's range. Now you might be asking yourself, well Xander, why the heck do you need to have a higher range stat when the weapon is already going to hit you cross map and have absolutely zero damage fall off whatsoever? That, my friends, is a superb and excellent question, and the answer as to why you want to have more range is because just like what it does for other weapons, it also increases the sniper's overall bullet magnetism. Essentially what that is it's the margin of error that you can still miss a critical headshot by and still have the game register that the bullet is landing, and so with the higher overall range base stat, that's exactly what you're going to have on all sniper rifles. In association with range and how that's then going to correlate to bullet magnetism, we have one other topic that's going to have a very similar symbiotic relationship, at least in terms of the weapon's base stats, and that's the weapon's overall aim assistance and its zoom factor. The reason as to why you want to have a high aim assistance factor is because that's then going to allow the weapon to actually correct itself as a Guardian is crossing in front of your reticle, and thus that's then going to entail the game, or rather I should say your personal aim assistance, to then hit a more critical headshot more likely. And in association with this, we then have zoom. And the reason why you want to have a low zoom factor, not a high zoom factor, is because you want to be able to see a larger peripheral vision whenever you're aiming down sights. I don't know about you, but I certainly do not want to be caught off guard from a Guardian who's flanking me on my left or my right as I'm doing a very nice quickscope, or if I'm aiming down sights for more than say 1 or 2 seconds. With a higher peripheral vision, not only are you going to be able to actually potentially get 1, 2, and maybe even 3 kills all while still aiming down your sights, but at the exact same time, this is then going to increase your overall effectiveness to not be flanked from a different Guardian on your left or right, and that is always a plus. With all this knowledge, I think that you guys now have a very good understanding as to what you're looking for, at least in terms of a weapons-based stats when it comes to sniper rifles. And as you guys can see from right here, this long goodbye has a very good range factor at 54 out of 100, an okay handling speed at 46, a really good aim assistance at 55, and best of all, an extremely low zoom factor at 40. Of all those base stats that I just mentioned, the one that's the most concerning is the weapon's handling speed at 46, because what that ultimately means is that we're going to have a very slow aim down sight time, or ADS for short. And so what we're looking for, at least in terms of the weapon's perks, is anything and everything to of course increase that handling speed along with the weapon's range and aim assistance altogether. Not just this, but if you were to actually compare this thing to other sniper rifles like say a Supremacy or something else along those lines, this weapon's overall zoom factor is almost just as good as that of the Supremacy, and the Supremacy is one of the best kinetic sniper rifles in the entire game. But the beautiful thing about this one is that once again, it's an energy sniper rifle, and so you compare it with say something like a service revolver or what I'm doing with a Warren's Law, and when this is the case, you open your arsenal to a much wider variety of weapons and combinations that you then can use to make the enemy guardians a little bit salty. Now you're probably thinking to yourselves, well, this is excellent information to know, but what the heck am I looking for perks in order to make this thing have very good handling speed and a higher overall range factor? That, Deislayers, is what we're going to get into this very second, and the best way to do so is to actually look at the perk combination that I happen to have on my weapon, and as you guys can tell, this long goodbye sniper rifle is in the adaptive frame R-type, has hammer forged rifling, high caliber rounds, snapshot sights, and dragonfly. With the entire adaptive frame R-type, this means that the weapon is in the high impact class, and we're going to cover more about this information in just a couple of minutes. But before we do so, I just want to mention that with hammer forged rifling, the weapon's then going to get a nice boost in range, and the same thing is also going to happen with high caliber rounds plus an additional flinch factor, and then comes snapshot sights, which is going to give the weapon an almost instantaneous aim down sight time, and lastly we then have dragonfly, which is then going to give the weapon a nice fiery explosion every single time that you happen to get an oh so juicy, oh so crispy, and oh so spicy critical headshot. But of all these perks that I just mentioned, we happen to have the most important one, which in my opinion is an absolute must to have on all sniper rifles, and that is snapshot sights. Remember what I said from earlier about handling and in particular ADS time? Well, my friends, I have some great news because our problem is now solved, and that's because snapshot sights is once again going to give you that instantaneous ADS time, and that's going to be very, very beneficial regardless whichever kind of playstyle that you have, and that could be either aggressive or passive or somewhere in between. Now I know that everyone's RNG is going to be very, very different from one Guardian onto the next, and so the very next thing that I want to mention and or discuss is all the perks that I would recommend. And so as you guys can tell from right here, this is a fantastic shot of all the perks that I would recommend in that first, second, third, and fourth columns. At first glance, this might be like a lot to take in and you may not even know what all these icons mean. So we're going to take one step back and we're going to look solely at that first column and that first column alone. And so as you guys can tell from right here, we happen to have that first perk, which is Arrowhead Break, followed by Corkscrew Rifling, Fluted Barrel, Hammer Forged Rifling, and Small Bore. Recall from what I said from earlier, and that what we're looking for here is all the barrel options that we can possibly think of that are going to increase the weapon's number 1, range factor, and number 2, handling speed. And so with all these perks right here, or rather I should say barrel options, that's precisely what we're going to have. No matter which one of those barrel options that I just mentioned, you simply cannot go wrong. But as for the second column, we have a similar case because in this scenario, we once again can almost not go wrong, because the ones that I recommend here are Alloy Magazine, Armor-Piercing Rounds, High Caliber Rounds, Ricochet Rounds, and Light Mag. Just like from before, we're looking for perks that are going to increase the weapon's handling speed or range factor, and luckily for us, we happen to have Armor-Piercing Rounds, High Caliber Rounds, Ricochet Rounds, and Light Mag, all of which are going to increase the weapon's overall effective range. And the reason why I also wouldn't mind having on Alloy Magazine here is because in a lot of cases, whenever you spawn, you're only going to have 2 bullets in your magazine, and before you even know it, those shots are going to be gone just like that. As you play more and more Crucible, you're of course going to pick up more ammo, and that's why you're then going to have 0 ammo in the magazine, and that's when Alloy Magazine is actually going to be procced because you're going to have a very fast reload whenever your magazine is at 0. Thus, it only makes logical sense that you're then looking for one of those 5 perks that I just mentioned. But as far as that third column goes, there is only one perk here that I would recommend, and one perk alone, and that's of course Snapshot Sights. If your long goodbye doesn't happen to have Snapshot Sights, then I'm sorry my friends, but the only option here is to dismantle this thing, at least in terms of PvP. Because if the weapon doesn't happen to have Snapshot Sights, then the handling speed is just going to be atrocious, and the definition of despicable, making the weapon very difficult to use within that PvP environment. Now the only other column of perks that we haven't discussed yet is that 4th column. And so as you guys can tell, I have all 4 of those perks highlighted, which happens to be number 1, Dragonfly, number 2, 4 times the charm, number 3, Rampage, and number 4, Rapid Hit. Now I'm not going to lie to you, Deislayers. Of those 4 perks that I just mentioned, I'd actually rather have something like Moving Target, as that's then going to increase my strafe speed along with my aim assistance whenever I'm aiming down sights. But unfortunately, we don't happen to have that option for this particular sniper rifle. And so instead, the ones that I would prefer over the others is, like I said from before, Dragonfly and then Rampage. Because with those 2 perks, you're only going to need 1 kill or 1 critical headshot to actually proc either of them. But with 4 times the charm and Rapid Hit, you're then going to need 2 critical headshots, the first of which is then going to return a bullet back into your magazine the more critical headshots that you get, while the second one is then going to increase the weapon's overall stability factor and reload speed, which isn't that bad either. With that, I think that you guys now have a pretty darn good understanding as to what you're exactly looking for on this long goodbye sniper rifle, as well as what other kind of base stats that you want to use or rather increase to make the weapon more effective at close and long range distances. However, I haven't given you guys my number 1 tip on how to use sniper rifles like I mentioned in the very beginning and the introduction of this entire video. And so that's what we're going to discuss this very second, which just so happens to be a technique that I call centering your target. Now I'm not going to give you guys a specific example of centering your target, because if you go back through and look throughout this entire game footage that you've seen so far, you're going to recognize that before I even aim down sights, I'm always putting my enemy guardians directly in the center of my screen before I even do any action at all. Essentially what I'm trying to accomplish is the most minute of minimal adjustments for when I do actually aim down my sights. And so finally when I do happen to see my reticle, I then maybe have to move 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters, and that's a very small adjustment to then actually get a critical headshot. For those of you that don't know, I happen to play on a sensitivity of 9, and that's regardless of whether or not I'm using a sniper rifle or a shotgun. And so the reason why I like to have that high sensitivity is because it makes those minute adjustments even faster, and that's why it might seem as if I'm able to get these incredibly fast quickscopes every now and then. Now I'm not saying that you have to use a high sensitivity, because that's not what I'm saying at all. The only reason that I mentioned my sensitivity is because it makes those minute adjustments even faster, and if you really want to get those critical headshots to be quick scopes and drag scopes, then this is what you might want to be able to practice regardless of whether or not you have a 9 sensitivity or you happen to have a 3 sensitivity, it doesn't matter. Now I know a lot of you have been asking me to please make a sniper rifle guide, and to all you Deislayers out there, I say that I'm going to make one that's not going to give some specific examples of the tip that I just mentioned, but many more to help you improve with your sniper rifle aim. And so the reason why I haven't done one so yet is because I'm waiting for Bungie to make these high impact adaptive frame weapons one-shot supers. And as soon as that happens to be the case, I guarantee you that how to sniper rifle guide is going to be out in a jiffy. Knowing this, I'm very intrigued to hear all your guys' thoughts on what kind of roles that you guys happen to have on your long goodbye. But I also want to hear some other thoughts on some other sniper rifles that you guys love, because I'm certainly looking for ones that are not just going to fill my energy slot, but also my kinetic slot, and so what I can't wait to see is exactly what you guys gotta say. Lastly, be sure to watch the newest, check the latest, and share a comment like on social media, because you are the greatest. That's pretty much all I've got for you as of right now, Deislayers. And so as always, GG TNT.